Hello. Today I'd like to talk a bit about the challenges of working with our art styles. So, if you look at a lot of games, they have a realistic art style, and because of it, they can just detail things as they want or create high resolution textures for everything, and then um, put it, just downsample things as necessary. But we sort of have the problems of a pixel art game without the benefit. Of course, the benefit of doing a pixel art game is there's a lot less pixels to work with. There's a lot less information you have to create. There's a lot less fidelity, and I'm sure pixel art artists are probably going to yell at me. I'm not trying to say they're easy, but I'm just trying to say there's less content, and I mean content in terms of pixels and whatnot, and certainly if you're going to do like photorealistic 3D graphics, there's a ton of content. There's normal maps, specular maps, displacement maps. But for Neverending Nightmares, we have to create something where every pixel sort of matters in that it needs to be consistent. So I talked about this in the 0.8 build video. The closer look is different for the paintings than the one that appears in game. And the reason for that is just to create consistency. We want to create something that looks like it's one drawing, even though it's made up of a bunch of different elements. And to truly do that, we should actually not scale anything ever. Like, we do have a limited amount of scale, so some objects can appear bigger and smaller. It just helps create the variety of art, but we do sort of bound that. It's 1.25x or 0.75x. That's the limit from the way it was drawn. But basically, we have to get everything drawn to scale, and usually we do it at almost always we do it at 4K resolution. So all the art is basically packed at different resolutions based on the display device. So if you're playing on the PC, we pack all the textures, assuming you're running it at 1080p. So while the polygonal rendering will look better at higher resolutions, the art detail pretty much caps out at 1080p. I mean, there may be a few textures if there's some magnification or whatever, where you may get a little extra fidelity, but basically it's designed for 1080p. And then actually on the Ouya we have two different versions. We have the 720p XMF is our WAD file. It's called XMF because it's one of the random file extensions that no one uses, that Android won't compress in zip files, and so there's an annoying technical reason for why it's called XMF, but that's our package file, or WAD, or PAC, or whatever you call it. It's XMF, and so we have the 720 XMF and the 1080 XMFs, and basically they have different texture data. They also have different model data because we bake in the UVs, and we do texture atlasing, so if with different textures the data is going to be different. So we actually have the two. We have a bunch of extra data on the Ouya versions because the Ouya 1 hardware runs at 720p, and the Mad Catz Mojo and runs at 1080p. And presumably moving forward there will be more devices in the Ouya sort of ecosystem, Ouya Everywhere or Ouya 2 or whatever, that will support the 1080p textures. But so we draw everything at 4K, and I mean, that means theoretically at some point we could make a 4K version of the game, but not everything ended up being 4K, because sometimes we have to adjust the resolution of something. So, like, it's drawn and the scale's not quite right, or we have to do something to match it. So some things, or we just messed up and didn't draw it big enough. So not everything is drawn at 4K, but I think probably most things we probably could do a 4K version. But I mean, I don't know who has a 4K anything. I certainly don't, so I don't know how we would test it. But I mean, it is possible to do a 4K remastered extra edition down the line, but certainly that's not on our radar at the moment. So anyway, we have to basically be very careful to always draw everything to scale, because things like line width, if the line width is inconsistent, that's a big problem. And so it's definitely been a bit challenging as well, coordinating between different artists. In terms of the environment art, most of that is done by Adam Grabowski, and character art is done by Chris Ewald, and having that separation, I think, has been helpful, just because characters are somewhat different than the environment, and so they don't have to perfectly match up. But I mean, it's challenging. I mean, still we have to do some work, and like Chris did all the portraits, and there's definitely work to make sure everything meshes together, as well as even within just keeping consistency, not forgetting, the spacing between the lines. And actually, we've had some interesting problems with vertical lines and subpixel alignment. So one of the levels, Destroyed Dreams, has a lot of vertical lines, and they were looking terrible. And so it turned out the reason they were looking terrible, well, they were only looking terrible some of the time, and it turned out the reason was because they, by default, were 1 pixel off of the, of where they should be. And so basically it's taking a thin black line and splatting it on 2 pixels and making them sort of a blurry gray, rather than, one sharp vertical line. So we actually had to do a bunch of work to do like pixel snapping based on the resolution, 1080p, 720p, and then sometimes they're even, because we position them based on center. So sometimes they have to be half a pixel off, and of course all of this is moot when your character starts walking. So one of the weird things in Neverending Nightmares, which is partially the art style and partially the way computer graphics hardware works, is when you walk, if you look at something with a lot of vertical lines, it does this weird, creepy sort of strobing, flickering, I don't know, it's a weird sort of effect. And the reason for that is because we do support sub-pixel increments for the camera, and so it can, basically blur, and the amount of blur changes depending on how far off it is from a pixel. And the reason we support sub-pixel increments is just so we can ensure the same gameplay, a nice smooth camera across, devices running at 1080p, devices running at 720p, and presumably if you're running it in a tiny window on PC for whatever reason, it doesn't chop around or doesn't, play differently. So, I mean, I don't know. It's a difficult art style from a technical perspective. I don't know if from the beginning we should have tried to make sub-pixel increments, or assume 1080p and then just do increments based off that or whatever. But it's definitely been a challenge to create the game in the art style we have. So anyway, that's just sort of an overview of how we create the art and the difficulties we face doing a game with our art style. So thanks for watching.